All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, while this offseason has been highlighted by dudes like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Patrick Queen, rightfully so with Mr. Patrick Queen, one thing that hasn't been talked about too much is the Pittsburgh Steelers draft ability. Not only this past season, but especially this season. I know that might have sounded a little confusing, but you get my point here. Joy Porter Jr., Broderick Jones, Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, Nick Herbig. We look at this year, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Roman Wilson, Peyton Wilson, Mason McCormick. I mean, the Steelers have done a phenomenal job at drafting in the last couple of seasons. And we know, like, especially if you get down to more in-depth positional groups like the wide receiver, we know that the Steelers have a good, repertoire. They've got a good history with drafting wide receivers and, all that fun stuff. But neither here nor there. My point is, I want to talk about the Steelers offseason, but more specifically their draft class, because once again, the whole offseason has just been highlighted and headlined like it really should, because Pittsburgh finally got a competent, capable quarterback in Russell Wilson. But that's just dominating storylines, and like I said, it should dominate storylines because freaking Kenny Pickett was not good enough, and he most likely never would have been good enough, which was a good thing that Pittsburgh decided to move on from him. But there's a lot of things about the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, whether it's drafting, whether it's free agency, whether it's player development, it really doesn't matter. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done a really good job, and I think their draft class this past season is going to hit it out of the park. So welcome back to the channel. Before we get into tonight's video, if you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. We're spamming basketball videos on this channel. I apologize, guys. Desperate times call for desperate measures. It is literally the most dead point in the NFL offseason you could possibly ever imagine. But don't worry, because the Pittsburgh Steelers will be running it in just a couple of weeks, and before you know it, the preseason will be here, and then the regular season will be here. So if you guys don't remember last year's preseason, Kenny Pickett and the first string slated offense for the Pittsburgh Steelers, guys, they were dominating. I don't believe, actually, this is off the top of my head here, I don't believe Kenny Pickett and the first string offense had a possession last season in preseason where they didn't score a touchdown. Now, the reason I'm even mentioning that is just none of this stuff really matters. Preseason doesn't really matter. Now, when you get into the nitty gritty of things, we want to see Troy, we want to see Zach Frazier, we want to see Roman Wilson, we want to see just, how Russell Wilson looks in a Steelers jersey. Yeah, maybe we're talking a little bit here, but even though preseason is very close away, it's, not going to tell the full story for the Pittsburgh Steelers projected season. So let's get into some of these new pickups that Pittsburgh got in this year's draft class. Now, I've always held the count or been in the camp that, look, man, if you're drafting an offensive lineman in the first round, if you're drafting an offensive lineman in the second round, if you're drafting an offensive lineman in any point of the NFL draft, it's going to feel a little bit underwhelming. But like we saw with Broderick Jones, last year's first round draft pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers, you shouldn't be underwhelmed, or one of their first round picks. You get what I'm saying? You shouldn't be overwhelmed. And that's exactly what you got with Troy Fautanu. So I was reading this article here from ESPN. They were kind of just going through all the Pittsburgh Steelers draft picks. The Steelers, or I should just say the NFL draft, was really interesting because all offseason, yes, Pittsburgh needed a wide receiver outside of, before Roman Wilson came in. The Steelers needed a wide receiver outside of George Pickens. But most Steelers fans thought they were going to draft some type of offensive lineman, whether that was specifically a center, ideally, most Steelers fans thought center, or a cornerback. They decided to go with a tackle in the first round. Troy Fautanu, round 1, pick number 20. He's slated in as your starting right tackle. We heard this quote here from Mike Tomlin about Troy Fautanu. His relationship with the game is a pure one, man. He's a competitor. He loves football. He loves the things that come with football based on talking to those around him, the preparation, the training, the practice. He's a black and gold type of guy. Troy Fautanu is slated for your starting right tackle here. We'll talk about Zach Frazier, new center, in just a second here. Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu as your starting left and right tackles. Folks, tackle is so important in the NFL. I don't need to explain to you guys. You just got, hopefully, your starting tackle, whether that's the right side, left side, whatever, for hopefully the next decade. So yeah, it might feel a little underwhelming, but Steelers fans certainly were not underwhelmed by the pickup of Troy Fautanu. Moving on to the second round. Once again, I remember making a bunch of Steelers videos the entire offseason. Everybody wanted either a cornerback or a center in the first round. Well, folks, you drafted one of the best tackles in the entire draft in the first round. Well, don't stop there. In the second round, pick 51, you got one of the best centers in the NFL draft in Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. He impressed the Steelers with his consistency, his work ethic. He was a 4-year starter over at West Virginia. He's going to step in right away over Mason Cole as a brand new starting center. Zach Frazier was a 2-time All-American. He is the second offensive lineman drafted by the Steelers this year and the third taken by the team in the first 2 rounds of the past 2 drafts. So it's clear the Pittsburgh Steelers are focused on building up that offensive line for the short and long term, but especially the long term. And then we've got round 3, pick number 84, Roman Wilson, wide receiver out of Michigan. I'll be honest, I'll keep it a buck here. When Pittsburgh traded away Deontay Johnson, like, I understand it, right? You know, final year of his contract, coming off a down season, he was injured a little bit. It didn't make much sense. And it didn't have anything to do with what they got back, a cornerback out of the Carolina Panthers, but I was just kind of confused. Why would you trade one of your best wide receivers on your team here? And then a couple of months later, in round 3, they draft Roman Wilson, a wide receiver out of Michigan. He can block. Michigan had a run-heavy scheme last season. Roman Wilson can block. It's something he's going to be asked to do frequently under Arthur Smith's new system, your brand new offensive coordinator. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. Let's just get into round 3, number 898 from Philadelphia, thanks to Kenny Pickett. Peyton Wilson, linebacker at NC State. Is funny because we're about to wrap up this video. The whole point of my video here was to kind of hype up Peyton Wilson. Speedy defender. You picked up Patrick Queen in free agency. The past 2 seasons, he's had 4 picks, a pick 6, 221 total tackles. The only reason he fell to the 3rd round was because he had 2 torn ACLs and a shoulder surgery that's kept him out of playing football for the last couple of seasons. So you got Cole Holmcomb recovering from last year's huge season-ending knee injury. So having a dude like Peyton Wilson, short-term, long-term, is going to be very beneficial. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for in today's video. I know it was a little chaotic, but my point is the Steelers, in my opinion, once again had a phenomenal draft. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Hit that like button, hit that sub up. Give me a grade rating on the Pittsburgh Steelers draft down below. Peace.